This guide is intended to assist you in generating an outline and thesis for your Rogerian argument. In your introduction, you need to indicate who you are writing to. Your audience is the person who wrote the argument you disagreed with. You also want to identify the issue you are writing about, but remember, you don't take sides yet. You are not going to let them know what you think about the issue, only that the issue itself is important. You may bring up current events to show why that issue is important. You may indicate why that issue is important to you in particular. You may want to share reasons for why you chose that author's argument. And you probably want to indicate why reading the author's argument benefited you. Remember from our examples where they indicated that they were enlightened by reading more information. It was thought-provoking. These are all things that you can bring up. You want to show the author that you found their work valuable. Of course, that's going to help them in deciding to listen to you. After you've introduced the issue and the article to which you're replying, you want to start by showing that you understand the audience's viewpoint. Remember that you're holding on to your own viewpoint until later. Right now, it's all about the person you're talking to. You want to state back their viewpoint to show that you fully understand them. So you want to indicate what their stance is on the issue. Summarize their main argument. Explain what kinds of support they provide. You may summarize the support, or you might state outright, this is how you support your argument. Try to indicate what led the author to the conclusion he or she reaches. This may be something that appears in the argument, or it may be something that you have to speculate on. You may have to guess. Finally, make sure you identify the values that led the author to hold that position. You want to show that you understand what the author cares about. Ideally, this is something that you care about as well, something that it is generally considered a good thing to care about. After you've shown that you fully understand what the other person is arguing, why they take their position, and what they value, you finally start to give your own opinion. But remember, at first you are only giving your positive opinion. You want to show them how much you support them. So first, hopefully you agree with the value you identified the author as having. You can recognize that and explain why trying to adhere to that value is so important. Identify any points the author makes that you do agree with. See if there's any evidence the author finds that you do think is convincing. You may even be able to provide more support for the author's argument that the author did not provide himself or herself. Last, explain why their choice to speak on that topic is important. Remember that you're respecting them the whole time. You want to show that their article is valuable to you, that you understand their viewpoint, and that you value the author's choice to speak on the topic, before you even disagree with them. Finally, after you've done all of those other things, you finally get to indicate what you disagree with the author about. Explain which of their particular claims you doubt. Include the evidence you found that may contradict the evidence the author provided. Point out where you find their predictions to be unrealistic. Explain what concerns you have that perhaps the author has not considered. You may bring in outside sources to support your viewpoint if you wish. Keep in mind that even now that you're allowed to disagree with the original author, you still want to do so respectfully. Remember how our example used terms like I believe, my concern is, I worry about, do you have any suggestions for? These are the best ways to disagree with your audience. After you've shown that you fully understand the other side and brought up your concerns, it's time to offer a compromise. I've given you 3 strategies you can use. The first one is choosing a middle ground. Sometimes there's a position halfway between yours and your audience's that you can choose. For example, you could suggest that a policy be put into place in some situations, but not all situations. Or you could suggest taking a less severe action than they propose, or perhaps a slightly more severe action than they propose, but less severe than you would favor. Or you can propose that you complete only some elements that they suggest. Maybe do some of the things they want to happen, but not others. Or for that matter, do some of the things that you want to happen, but not others. Your second tactic would be an alternative focus, finding a related issue that you and your audience can agree on, so you can redirect your attention away from your disagreement. Ask yourself whether there's another way to address the problem, in addition to the proposals that you and your opponent differ on. Perhaps there's an intervention that would keep the situation you disagree on from occurring. For example, in my thesis sentence that tries to mediate between a pro-choice and pro-life stance, the third choice could be to solve unwanted pregnancies. If that solution actually took place, it would preclude the problem that the two sides disagree on. Finally, you can ask yourself what would be accomplished by you and your audience if you redirected your attention from argument. Is there something valuable that could happen if you stopped fighting over this issue and focused on something else? Remember, that valuable thing must be something that you and your audience can agree on. It's not a compromise if it's something that you want but your audience doesn't care about. Finally, there's reconsideration. You could ask your audience to look at the topic from a new point of view or in light of new information. As I warned you in class, if you take this stance, you're going to need to make sure that you really do have a new point of view, a new way of looking at it. So ask yourself if perhaps you have new evidence that shows a more effective way for the author to adhere to his or her values than the stance you disagree with. Perhaps you have thought of a truly new perspective on the subject that you haven't seen anyone bring up before. Or maybe there is brand new information, a new study, or information that is little known or recently discovered on your topic that you can bring to light to ask your audience to consider. Once you know what compromise you're proposing, you have your thesis. Your thesis must include the proposed compromise between the two positions. Remember, it will either be the last sentence in the second to last paragraph or the first sentence of your conclusion. In addition to your compromise, what middle ground you want to argue for, you might also include an acknowledgement of the different positions that you and your audience hold. You might want to acknowledge the values you share, or you might wish to emphasize the importance of addressing the problem. Don't try to fit all three of these in there, but choose what you need to make your sentence address your entire essay. Remember that your thesis is going to be a summary of your argument through the entire essay, so it's best to make it as full yet concise as possible. Now that you have your thesis decided, it's time to give your conclusion. This is a delayed thesis argument, so there's very little after you finally come to your point. Some things you might want to include in your conclusion. For example, why is it important for you and your audience to discuss this problem at all? Are there specific actions that can be taken to follow through on the compromise to show that it's feasible and easy? Why do you think a compromise is better than either of the two alternatives? What can you gain by choosing to work together instead of apart? These are all things that you can emphasize in your conclusion to show why it's so important that you and your audience address the issue on which you disagree and take steps to make a compromise on the issue instead of going your separate ways.